Hello and welcome to Joe Chambers Questions Everything podcast. I have the absolute pleasure today being joined by an absolute legend. So thank you for joining me today. We've got a lot to talk about. I've been going through all of your Facebook posts recently, and I have to say I find them more than 50% funny. I think they're very well thought through, well articulated. And I also enjoy some of the memes you post. For instance, the pitchfork one I thought was pretty funny as well. I also know that you've recently been to Brighton's training ground and you've written a football poetry book. So how was that experience?
I just did the podcast
Yeah,
for the official podcast for the club. I've got I mean, obviously, I've done this for 45 years. I co-founded Brighton Independent Supporters Association at the worst of times in the early 90s when we were basically bottom of the whole league and our ground had been stolen from us. We fought to save the club. All my life, obviously, I've written poems. I've earned my living as a poet since 1980. I write poems about all kinds of things, including football. I've chronicled the long battle of the Albion for the fans to get from bottom of the fourth division with no ground, where we started in the mid-90s, to where we are now, which is obviously doing pretty well in the Premier League and having unbelievably qualified for Europe 2 years ago for the first time, which was just absolutely fantastic beyond belief. And I've been the club's poet in residence for forever really. I've got a lot of my poetry up in the North Stand in our home end. One poem especially called Goldston Ghost, which is about our long battle to save the club and how it relates to me and my memories of my dad. He died when I was 10, and like so many of us who love football, we get our first memories of the game from our fathers. And because he died when I was so young, it's kind of a real absolute complete, if you like, just a full memory of my whole life as a football fan, which always reflects back on him taking me to those early games. And incidentally, is there someone cutting a tree down? Is that a problem?
only if you're stood underneath it, I think.
All right, yeah,
Don't worry,
that's
the
good.
technology should be able to cut that
Yeah,
sound out.
but I know nothing about technology, but yeah. So yeah, I've just done a book. It's called A Lifetime of Football Poetry, Poems, Songs, and Stories. It's published, amusingly enough, in Finland by fans of Tampere United, whose club, and they're one of the biggest towns in Finland. I mean, so Finland's a small place, and by sort of major football standards, obviously, probably in the third of the four divisions, probably in terms of how we would say it in league terms. But obviously, they have dedicated fans, and their club, originally called FC Tampere, was closed down for money laundering a few years ago. They don't mess around in Finland, as in Iceland. You don't
Yeah,
go through 93 different sort of appeals or whatever to the FA or to FIFA. You get shut down. So anyway,
yeah,
the fans decided to start the club up again as a fan-owned club, and I'm honoured to say they were inspired by what happened at Brighton, and what we did in the Independent Supporters Association to fight back and save the club, and by my poetry. And they asked to publish a book of my poetry, and I was really pleased about that because I'd just done my collected works. I thought it was about time that I did a book of my football poetry,
mm,
and they've published it, and it was launched in Finland a few weeks ago. Because, as I'm sure I don't need to explain why, their season goes from March to October, because
yeah.
otherwise every single match would be postponed because of a frozen pitch. And we're launching it in September. And I've been on the official club podcast. I've got a double-page spread in the program, and I'm doing a pitch side interview at half time. So the Albion are doing me proud,
Yeah.
and I'm very pleased. And incidentally, you may or may not know this, our documentary, the Stand or Fall, the incredible story of Brighton of Albion, is out now on Amazon Prime and Netflix and all those things, because it is an amazing story.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to check that one out. It is an amazing story. I remember when I was a teenage boy, Swindon were in the playoffs against Brighton, and you had an athletic stadium. I think it was at the Withdean. Um,
Woods, yeah.
and
Oh,
it wasn't really a complete stadium. To think that you've gone from that, in the same time Swindon have really floundered, to being an established Premier League club is
Joe,
bewildering.
it was far worse than that, mate. 1997, when we lost the ground, We saved our Football League status with a 1-1 draw at Hereford in the last game of the 1990s. 7 to 8, last game 96 to 97 season. And then, so when the season restarted in August, for 2 years, we had to play our home games at Gillingham because we didn't have a ground. And we had to ground share with Gillingham, which is in Kent, in a different
Yeah.
county, 140 miles away. And for those 2 years and the following 12, when we were at Withdean, I was the PA announcer and DJ. So I was playing punk, ska and reggae. And we had a Phil Collins band, and it was great fun. And all the time we were campaigning, firstly to get, obviously to get the club back from Gillingham to Brighton, where we set up the Seagulls Party and basically said to the council, if you don't find us somewhere to play, we're going to stand against you in the local elections. And to concentrate their minds, we did. We stood 3 candidates who got about 25% of the vote each. I made them think, my God, we better do something about this. So they got us back to Brighton, and then we had to spend a ridiculous 12 years campaigning to get from Withdean to Falmer, where we are now. Some other people referred to it by the title of a credit card. As I say in one of my poems, our lovely Falmer Stadium, the board may not agree. I've never had a credit card. It's still Falmer to me. Because that's what we fought for. And we got to number 17 in the charts in 2005. I don't know whether you heard about that. Seagull Scar. We got just after Christmas, we got to number 17 in the charts. I rewrote an old Piranhas song, a Brighton band called the Piranhas, and a song called Tom Hark. I rewrote it as we want Falmer. For years, the planning process has dragged on and on. A paralytic snail wouldn't take that long. So listen, Mr. Prescott, as we tell you how we need our Falmer Stadium, we need it now. And that got to number 17 in the charts because we organised a very sort of campaign just after Christmas for everyone to buy it at a time when no one else put records out, and it worked. So it's an amazing story. So
it is an amazing story.
There it is. I should have waved it at you already, but that's the that's the book. I gave your dad a copy the other week. So
nice. Do you want to put it in front of your face so it's just in front of the camera? Yeah, Attila the Stockbroker. Brilliant. Yeah. I'll definitely have to get myself a copy.
You can get it from my Bandcamp page, and just email and everything, obviously. So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's an amazing story. And I think what it shows is that if you want stuff to change, you can use the arts and you can use creative means to do so by changing the way people think. And you can almost subtly put pressure on people through humour as well. And I think there's definitely a power in that.
Yeah. Humour is an incredibly important part. But the lesson of Brighton Hove Albion, what we did there, the big lesson, the big story of that was, I always say this, when we're talking about the state of the country now, the Battle to Save Brighton Hove Albion is the most successful direct action campaign that I've ever been involved in. In between 1994 and 97, when we saw the club going down the pan, we supporters mobilised to throw out the people that were destroying it. I mean, a guy called Bill Archer had got control of the shares of our club for £56.25, from his boss, effectively, who had been the chairman, who was a drunkard, who was completely useless, and he let the other guy have the shares. He then sold the ground behind our backs, and basically he wouldn't have cared if the club had died.
Yeah.
He lived 260 miles away, and we went to his house 4 times. Once a load of us, because we were playing Wigan away, so we organised a march to his village, and I put a leaflet through everyone's door saying in poetry, saying what, and I played the fiddle on his wall and everything with all the police there. And then we came back 3 more times, just a few of us in a car, alerting the police beforehand. And three times it's like the miners' strike, this great sort of load of police in front of his house, protecting his house. And there's me and Paul and 2 Pauls. So there's me, a punk poet, and one Paul who's an accountant, and the other Paul who was an NHS administrator, just going to put a letter through his door. And there's all these riot police there, not riot police, but police, thinking there was going to be another big riot. We were the alternative football fraction. We stood up for our club, and we won. And that, for me, is that the legacy of that is that, and how we did it was by galvanizing thousands and thousands of ordinary people focused on one thing, which is the love of the club, not focused on, and basically just saying, so we are going to save this club. So we organised boycotts of this man's Archer's business. a company called Focus DIY. We had demonstrations outside the political party conferences. So I say we did this single. We bombarded the then what's his name, Home Secretary John Prescott's office with flowers on Valentine's Day, saying, "Please give it, dear Don, please give us our new ground." It was just really fun, really inventive, and it works. And see, this is the point. If you sit around not doing anything, then nothing changes. If
Yeah.
you want to change something, you have to get off your ass and do something. But the most important thing is it has to be focused, it has to be fair, it has to be non-violent, which is all what we did. And it has to be, it has to have the right goal. I mean, we knew who the enemy was,
Yeah.
and we got rid of them. The point about what's happening in this country right now is that the actual enemy are billionaires and rich people manipulating people through
Yeah.
media, through social media, blaming other people, blaming immigrants and scapegoats generally. It's been done throughout history
Yeah.
for the fact that people are poor and the housing conditions are bad, whereas there's more than enough money out there for everyone to be well fed, well housed, and well looked after if the government policies were different. And I understand why so many people are so angry. I mean, for absolutely no question of that, I completely get it. But the targets are completely the wrong people. That's the point.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. There is a distraction from the real political enemy. So I think
If I
what
could
you've
say, the analogy with the analogy with the Albion would be if we were having all this stuff going wrong with our club, being destroyed by this guy who just wanted to wreck it and make a big profit out of it. If we spent all our time protesting against the manager of the team, right, that would be a pretty good analogy, because the manager of the team has no power. Or protesting against the player, even better analogy would be protesting against the players for not being good enough. But the reason they're not good enough is because there's no money, because the people at the top are destroying the club and they don't want to pay for good players. You know, it's actually focusing anger on the people that are causing the problem. That is essential. And the people that are causing the problem are guilt sellers in the city. Is the IMF, is the people who demand these fiscal rules and say, if you don't do this and this and this, then we'll sell off all the gilt shares, and we'll have another crisis like we did in 2008. And of course, 2008 is the start of all this, because that destruction, when the bankers stole the money of millions of ordinary hardworking people, and we were forced into bailing them out, and the beginning of austerity began. That's where all this nonsense started off. With in 2008 with the banking crash, which wasn't, they called it a credit crunch. It wasn't a credit crunch. It was completely deliberately manufactured by bankers to make profits.
So how do we counteract that? How do we organize and galvanize people against the right target?
Well, my view about that is it's first of all, it's difficult in the first instance because we have the most useless Labour Prime Minister in the whole of history. I mean, like literally, I mean, I was pleased. I mean, I didn't think it would be that good, but I was pleased when Labour got in last year. I didn't think it was going to be as terrible as it is now, though. I mean, and the alternative is even worse. We get rid of Starmer, we end up with Nigel Farage, who is exactly what I've just said. I mean, he's an an ex sort of trader, city trader, bankrolled by billionaires, and basically pointing the finger at various scapegoats around society to divert people's anger away from the fact that they're not having good lives. Because in order to make sure that the billionaires who are causing the problem and stopping people from having good lives keep all their money, and frankly, the way you've got to deal with it is tax the rich. First of all, is a fair taxation system, stopping people taking millions of pounds out of the country, a fair taxation system, a fair immigration system. That is really important too. I mean, it's ridiculous. There's all these boats coming across the channel. The whole thing should be sorted out by a fair judgment way for people to be able to have a proper channel from which they can channel their claims to make fair claims to be accepted. And because that hasn't been working, this is why we've got all these problems we've got now. I mean, it's a complete mess, and the Labour Party's not sorting it out. The Tories didn't sort it out before. I would say probably Labour is slightly better than the Tories, But Farage will be just a million times worse because he doesn't care about ordinary people at all. He won't help anybody. He won't help people who've got no money living in substandard accommodation. He believes in privatising the NHS. He won't give any support to ordinary people. He believes in privatising the NHS, in hire and fire. They've all Reform all voted for hire and fire. They don't believe in proper union representation. You know, I mean, one of the saddest things, one of the saddest moments of my adult life was when I saw the by-election result in Easington last time when Reform got hold of Durham Council. I was invited by Davy Hopper, the president of the Durham Miners Association, a good mate of your dad's, as you know, perform there on the day of Thatcher's funeral. Right? They had a what they described as what they called a spit roast on the day of Thatcher's funeral, and they invited me to perform there. And I had such a good time, and it was such a warm, friendly place, and the pride and I mean, obviously, I did loads of gigs during the miners' strike. I'm not boasting or whatever, but I did everything I could to support the mining communities around the country in 1984-5, and I did many all over, but especially in Yorkshire and Durham. And when I saw that village had been taken by Reform, it just made me so sad, and the whole of the area going that way makes me so sad. And it is Labour's fault. There's no two ways about it. It's Labour's fault. It's the Tories' fault. It's the fault of successive governments who've just been more of the same thing, which has given Farage an open door. And the only way of opposing that is to get back to have a party which concentrates on economics rather than on side issues like, I mean, okay, all this stuff about what we call the culture wars, it is important. I mean, the identity, whatever, that is important. I mean, I'm not saying it isn't important. I'm not saying that people of colour don't get a worse deal, or trans people don't get a worse deal. But ultimately, if we are going to get this country back on track, then the number one focus for any political party wanting to get elected by ordinary people, by working class people, has got to be the economics of the country, the simple things. Having decent, affordable, good quality housing, having roads and infrastructure which works, having hospitals and schools that function, that are well funded, having town centres that are full of shops. And mate, I can tell you this from experience, right? I can tell you this. I've got a poem called The Lucky Generation. I grew up in exactly that time. I am the living proof, a living symbol of the welfare state. I come from actually quite a right-wing working class family. My father died when I was 10. No one in my family had ever been to university before. I went to university at 17 on a full grant. Couldn't have dreamt of going there otherwise. And then when I came out of university, I went and lived in Harlow, Newtown in Essex for quite a while. Me and my mate sharing a flat. I think we paid £4 a week each for the rent, which enabled me to save up all the money I was getting from gigs and eventually get my own place. There was good amenities everywhere. The buses ran, the trains ran, all of the stuff which your generation doesn't. I mean, imagine now. I know exactly what it's like because I've got 4 stepchildren. What it's like for people of your generation, especially now, and even 10 years ago when ours were going to go to university with between £30,000 and £90,000 worth of debt. It's ridiculous. It's completely wrong. The people that built the country are being treated like dirt, and the rich are being pampered. And
you
just
should see
getting
the
everything.
interest that you pay on student loans as well.
I know. As you're paying interest on student loans, while they are getting huge amounts of interest or shares on their shares in these privatised companies, especially like the sewage works, the water, where they're getting millions of pounds of money going out in dividends and payments to shareholders and CEOs, while we get shit in the seas and rivers, and we get shit in the seas and rivers, and the prices go up. And we live 300 yards from a sewage outfall on the Sussex coast, and it's disgusting. Sometimes the sewage comes up through the drains in the village because the infrastructure is so terribly bad, and it hasn't been treated for so long, hasn't been brought up to date for so long. And the reason for that is that they're giving the money to the shareholders. It's completely
Yeah.
wrong. It is completely wrong. It's going to take a lot of time to heal this country. But racism and violence and division and setting people against each other is not the way to do it.
But it's a perfect way to distract people from the fact that everything in this society is about driving more profit for these multinational corporations who are able to be
Yeah.
fluid across different markets. So if you do increase taxes in the UK, they go somewhere else. But one of the posts you put on Facebook, which was really good, was about how railways, sewage, all the sort of utilities that we have, they are paying people in other countries, which then just means that we're just getting squeezed from every direction. Rent's going up, bills are going up, food's more expensive. But that's great because it keeps the profit levels for all these rich billionaires across the world happy. They get more
Ironically,
money.
with some of the train companies, so our train companies are privatized, and they're then run by the state-owned rail companies of other countries. It's just
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. It was done for ideological reasons, and the rot started. We go all the way back to Thatcher. That's where it started. That is why there was the party on when she died. By that time, she was an old woman with Alzheimer's. People said, "Well, I mean, I wasn't celebrating her death. I was just looking back on the terrible things she'd done during her life." And the most awful thing, the most terrible thing she did, and the cleverest thing from her point of view, was during that first term, 1979 to 83, when she instigated the right to buy council houses. So basically, council houses, as you know, were sold off. People were given the chance to buy their council house at a ridiculously low price, and the money which came in from those council house sales was not. That was it was a law was made that the councils could not spend that money building new council houses, and the reason that was done was social engineering, because Thatcher wanted the people that had bought their council houses to think, "Oh, I'm part of the system now, so I'm going to vote Tory. I've got a vested interest now, so I'm going to vote Tory," turning people from Labour to Tory. And she didn't want more council houses to be built because she wanted to destroy that social link, that social bond, and the idea that the state would provide the most important things in life. And the most telling thing that she said, again, something you probably know, one of her quotes, think about this: "There's no such thing as society, only individuals and their families."
Yeah.
That's what
I
she
have heard
said.
that. Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
And that is the thing. In the 80s, late 70s, we went through a psychological shift in the UK. And I think what's happening now is another psychological shift, which will be causing division, particularly between people who consider themselves British and then everyone else. And I think that psychological shift is not just happening in the UK, but it's happening in America and other Western countries. And that's
It is.
because there's this sense that there isn't enough to go around. But that's because we've been squeezed so long that people are now looking at the other person thinking that they're the one taking off their plate, when really what's being taken off their plate is coming from above.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a wonderful cartoon which is circulated for a long, long time, where you've got one individual who is actually Rupert Murdoch, who's got 99 cookies in front of
Yeah.
him. And then there's a worker with one cookie. And sitting opposite him, there's an immigrant with no cookie. And Rupert Murdoch, with his 99 cookies, is saying to the worker, "Oi, mate, that immigrant wants to take your cookie." That sums it up. That is what
Yeah.
it's all about. And what I got to say about this, I mean, we are now at a really febrile period in our history. I mean, I'm 67. I grew up in the 70s and 80s when we had lots of trouble with the far right. I mean, I was targeted by the far right geeks a bit, more than a bit in the 80s. Then it all died off, and things got a lot better. But they got a lot better at a time when society was kept more caring, there was more money going around, and people actually had better lives. And as austerity caused by the banking crisis and Tory policy, and now sadly also Labour policy, has taken that away, people are starting to believe basically the lies of these people like Farage, who are saying the reason this is like that is because of immigrants. And as I've already said, I mean, but it is an obvious fact to say that if everybody in this country had decent accommodation, a decent level of income, decent healthcare, blah blah blah, then all this issue of people, of immigrants coming in, whatever, would not be so much of an
Absolutely.
issue. And I do agree. I do agree that everybody who comes into the country should be subjected to proper checks. I mean,
Yeah,
one of the things that they're saying is, we don't know who's coming in, and the fact of the matter is, I mean, theoretically, they should know who's coming in because they all get picked up and processed. But the whole point about that is that it would be far, far better if there was a proper system where people applied for their asylum in this country from another country beforehand, and so it could all be, the decisions could be made first before people got here. I mean, that's the geography of the country being an island with this 21 miles of sea between us is actually, in this instance, it's made things really difficult because it is. I mean, I know, as someone who loves the sea, lives by the sea, it is entirely dependent on what the weather's like. I mean,
yeah,
but when somebody says, how could you blame immigration on the weather? Well, I'd simply turn around and say, well, I live on the coast. I live 200 yards from the sea. And when the sea's rough, no one gets in a small boat and comes across the channel. So there you go. And the other thing is, around here, because I also live 300 yards from a RNLI lifeboat station. And believe it or not, you now get people having to go at the RNLI. And I know, because I come from a Sussex port town, and I know people that volunteer for the RNLI, that they are the bravest, most selfless, wonderful people you could possibly imagine. And it's absolutely ridiculous to start having to go at those people who volunteer to save people's lives and who pledge, like a doctor pledges to save life,
yeah.
regardless of the situation. The RNLI pledge to save any person in trouble on the sea. You know that old hymn, for those in peril on the sea? If you come from the sort of, I mean, your origins are in a coastal town, very much so. So you know that you know all this anyway.
So,
Anyway, I mean, I've said my piece about this. Well, the only other thing I would say about it would be a call for understanding and unity. And if not unity, because that is going to be difficult to achieve now, but for people to talk civilly and sensibly and honourably to each other instead of throwing insults around all the time. And one of the things that I've managed to do, and it's funny how it's evolved, is I've managed to create the only Facebook page in the world which doesn't have loads and loads and loads of people hurling abuse at each other and threatening each other and being at each other's throats all the time.
yeah,
And I don't even need to do anything about making sure that it is like that, because the atmosphere that's existed on it with its 55,000 followers, as they've gradually grown, has been along the lines of, you're welcome on my page, and you don't have to agree with me or the people on here, but you have to present coherent arguments, and you have to avoid being being aggressive or racist or just behaving like a bell end. It's like,
yeah.
it's as simple as that. And
And
if
I
there was
think,
more of that, look, and I take my own side as well. I mean, both sides are guilty of this. I mean, it isn't just on one side. It's, there's this division, and people are standing either side of a bear pit and hurling abuse at each other. And that is completely ridiculous. And it won't get any of us anywhere.
but I think that's why the element of humor in the discourse that you have on your Facebook page is actually really important, because everything you've said is said a little bit playfully, and therefore the response can also be a little bit playful, because there is humor from both perspectives of the sort of farcical nature of what's going on in the world.
Absolutely. You know, um, I used to believe in ideology. I used to believe in sort of Marxist stuff and all the rest of it. I don't anymore. I believe in myself. I trust my brain to come up with its own conclusions. And when I think about my favorite quotes about the role of art in society, or what I do, or how I use words and music or art or creativity to express a point of view, I don't quote these days. I don't quote from Bertolt Brecht or Marx or Engels or Che Guevara or whatever. I quote from Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. See?
Amen. Amen to that. Yeah, absolutely.
Because that whole point, I want to get across, communicate to everybody. In the 80s, when we had all this stuff going on before, I would deliberately do gigs in venues or with bands who were, should we say, had people in their following who were influenced by the far right, mainly just young working class kids who got nothing and were being told a load of bollocks by older people that wanted to use them for their political ends. And I went in there and I had this one poem that I used to do called Andy's a Corporatist, which summed up at the time what what all this was about. And I put it on an album. When me and my best mate Steve Druitt, he's got a band called the Newtown Neurotics, and we did the very first ever, dub reggae. We did the very first ever dub punk track. So we took the vocals off, boofed the bass up, took most of the guitar off. A song of his called Mindless Violence, and I did this poem over the top, and I put it on an Oi album in 1983. And Oi was the kind of street punk movement of the early 80s, which was to a certain degree influenced by the far right. So I put this poem on this album, and it went out to these tens of thousands of people. It was a compilation album put out by Gary Bushell, who was a leading music journalist and figure in sort of Oi street punk sort of thing. And it reached loads of people, and loads of people ever since have come up to me, said, "Oh, John, I was a little kid. I was 15 years old, and I was starting to believe all this stupid racist bollocks. And then I heard that poem of yours on that Oi album, and it changed my life." And I'm honoured about that. It also got me quite a lot of aggro from the far right at the time. I'm going to perform it for you now. Andy's a corporatist. He is corpulent, often pissed, and he is friends with Flemish Nazis, goes to Hitler's birthday parties 7 times a year. I remember the 100 Club, he was there on business, but he couldn't start a riot, so he stayed kind of quiet, and the business didn't play, so Andy went away. I met him in Birmingham the day the shit really hit the fan. The fan was me and the shit was Andy. Upstarts concert, really handy. Broken Noses, really dandy. Andy thinks it's such a laugh to sing Horst Wessel in the bath, smash up other people's fun, make page 20 of The Sun, but I knew his time would come. And his mate came up today, told me he'd be put away. Stupid nutter anyway. That's all he said. Then turned away. What a waste. That's all I'd say. Maybe he'll change, somehow, someday. A year of life went down the drain. Then they let Andy out again. The guys inside had changed his mind. He'd left his Nazi past behind. One day I met him in the pub. He'd finished with the killing club. He said he had to watch his face because you don't leave the master race. Though Andy and his local crew stand firm against the chosen few. He's playing in a rebel band to spread the word across the land. And sometimes in a pissed up haze, he talks about the bad old days. And here's his message, loud and clear. We'll never let it happen here. You Nazi boneheads ought to know that you will be the first to go, because what they want is serried ranks, unsmiling clones in chieftain tanks, no room for music, punk or skin. They'll bring the goose-step marchers in and take our football and our bands, smash our guitars and break our hands. So no more crap about colour of skin, because unity is the way to win. And what our Andy says is true. Stand firm. Don't let them hoodwink you. I wrote that in 1982.
Brilliant.
It's as valid now as it was then.
Exactly, yeah. And it can actually reach people because people don't want to feel like they're getting lectured to, but there's something more seductive about music or comedy. It almost gets past your defenses in a way that if you actually just try and like talk down on someone aggressively, doesn't.
Of course. I mean, the reason I take the bit out at the beginning where I interrupted you when you called me a comedian. I mean, it's a kind of a bit of a standing joke where I describe myself as the founder of the anti-comedy league, love humour, hate comedy. And I'm sure I don't need to explain to you, because you're a very intelligent bloke, what I mean by that. In other words, comedy now, for me, having grown up right from the very beginning of it, it's a kind of a sausage machine where you start off doing a 5-minute spot in a club, then you get a 10-minute spot in a club, and your aim is to get a 20-minute spot, and then to get a spot on some crappy, awful quiz show, and then get on some celebrity thing, and then get the job on television advertising undrinkable urine of Satan non-beer like John Smith's or whatever. And that is to me is comedy. It's a kind of a corporate thing. Humour is being funny. I love humour. I'm a humorist. 50% of my set, I aim to have people roaring with laughter. 25% seething with anger, and 25% not bawling their eyes out, but empathising with very human, because I write a lot of very personal stuff as well. Loads of very personal stuff about my family. And I want to finish. I mean, tell me if Are you happy? Have you covered everything? Have we covered everything you wanted to ask me?
Well, I did want to ask you about
What-
another joke, which is the debacle of the Jeremy Corbyn party at the moment. I'd like to get your thoughts on how that's unraveling a little bit.
Well, oh yes. Well, I wrote something this morning, actually, which I put out. You know the song "It's My Party and I'll Cry If I Want to."
Yeah.
Presumably, I know it's not your generation, but it is quite well known. So this morning, I rewrote it in a in a humorous way, with a deliberately non-scanning bit in the middle. So where's this not coming up? There we go. Nobody knows where my Johnny has gone. Judy left the same time. We disagreed about applying Trotsky's transitional program to the objective material conditions of today, and they shared the same ideological line. It's your party, and I'll cry if I want to, cry if I want to, cry if I want to. You should cry through. The left hasn't a clue. Da, 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 da. Exactly. People, I mean, the left, many people on the left, especially the more intellectual left, would rather spend their lives arguing over ridiculously little trivial matters with other people on the intellectual left than talk to ordinary working class people about the issues that matter to them, because they're scared or because or whatever, I don't know. And it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, what is happening now? We've got this awful division in our society, and Corbyn and Sultana and all the others. It's all the old suspects, all the old ideologues arguing with each other. It's like, it is that Monty Python sketch, which again, I know it's not your generation, but you must know the sketch I mean from The Life of Brian.
Yeah, I've seen Life of
We
Brian.
ate more than the Romans. GMP was fun.
Yeah.
Who the GMP was fun? Where the P was fun of Judea. The only people we ate more than the Romans and the GMP was fun. And that just sums it up. It's ridiculous. I'm ecumenical. I mean, I've written a lot about religion as well recently. I mean, I put up a cartoon about some horrible MAGA arsehole trying to get into heaven. And so Peter's saying to him, well, it says here that you went to church all your life and proudly claimed you're a Christian, you worship billionaires and loathe homeless people and cheered cruelty. What the actual fuck. And that reached 1.9 million people. And there was this wonderful confluence on my Facebook page of literally thousands of people from America discussing and arguing about what religion meant, and nearly all of them really polite, even though they disagreed. It's kind of my Facebook page appears to have a magic effect on people. I mean, so I got MAGA and non-MAGA people arguing politely with each other. Well, it must be said that 95% of the people who come on are obviously progressive. So, and the right, I know occasionally a dumb threat from somebody, I just ignore it. I mean, when you've stood up on stage and had bottles thrown at you and had your mandolin smashed over your head, then somebody having a go at you on the internet doesn't really cut much ice. I mean, but I don't want to pick a fight with anybody. I want to spread understanding. And what's happened with this new party is completely ludicrous. But I will say, from my 67 years and probably 50 years involved in some form of left-wing politics, it's just completely what happens. We just, when there's an old phrase, when the left needs a firing squad, it forms a circle. I mean, it's complete nonsense, especially right now, but we need to present coherent arguments to ordinary people to get us out of this mess.
Yeah.
Because the left has a terrible reputation. At the moment, people are believing, ordinary people who aren't fascist or racist, and that's the other thing. I mean, the stand up to racism, I don't agree with just standing there going, shoot yourself like Adolf Hitler did, or Nazis come off our streets, to loads of quite ordinary people who are marching down the street with a Union Jack or a George's Cross flag because they feel that their community has been completely left to rot by successive governments, and they are somehow believing that trying to restore pride in their community means walking down the street with a flag or painting a cross on the roundabout, which is silly in my opinion. Restoring pride in the community means campaigning to get the money from central government to do this. And as I think I've said to you, my wife is a local councillor. She works incredibly hard, and we have seen just how bad the cutbacks are. All these really good people sneer at local councillors. Because some local councillors are lazy gits, but certainly the one I love is somebody who is doing everything she can to help the people who need it most, with funds constantly being cut, with infrastructure constantly being run down. It's really difficult. It's absolutely really difficult. You know, uh, I mean, and what's happened with this new party is tragic. It's absolutely tragic. Where it was so Sultana sends out a sort of a portal for people to make donations to join, and then Corbyn slaps a writ on it. I mean, you couldn't make it up. It's like something. It is like something out of Monty Python. I mean, I'm glad that I never put my weight behind them. I'm still in the Labour Party. I'm only in the Labour Party because of what's happening down here. And I guess that's it's a question. You know, we're going on a bit now, but I'll bring this up because we mentioned it when I was talking before. So at the very same time that more and more people in the north especially, but more and more working class, I hate this. What's the division between a working class person and a middle class person? Well, in terms of my background, I'm no different from anybody else, you know, but I went to university because I was clever. Uh, that doesn't mean that my family had money. It just meant that I had skills in a particular area. I can't change a plug. I mean, I'm useless at DIY. I've got a poem called "No Such Thing as Society." You know, people come around to mend stuff, and I marvel at the skill that they use, and that their contribution and what they do is absolutely as valid as anything that any intellectual or poet or musician or professor does. It's all working together that makes a society, and that's what's so important. But you know, to generalise, the more working class people are voting or thinking of voting right wing, and more middle class people, if you want to use that description, are voting left wing. When I was growing up, when I was a kid, it was pretty simple. If you lived in a semi-detached house or a detached house or not in a council house, and you had a job where you wore a suit or collar and tie, you tended to vote Tory. And if you were a blue collar worker lived in a council house, you tended to vote Labour. And now it's almost going the other way around. And I like at the very same time as Labour is collapsing in the north, in your area and in places like Bolsover, wherever, we here in Sussex, starting in 2017, where we hadn't had a single Labour councillor for 40 years, in 7 years after Jeremy Corbyn got in, built a party which took two councils and both two councils turned Labour for the first time in history, and both our MPs Labour for the first time in history. And this was because, not despite, whereas in the north and various other places, we lost because of Jeremy Corbyn. Here, we were inspired and we won because of Jeremy Corbyn. So there's a completely different, there's a complete kind of difference. And you can see it when we're canvassing around here. You know, the nice big houses now, most of them vote Labour, and it's on the council estates where they're voting Tory and now Reform. And that is just that shows how awful Labour has been in government. It shows how awful the Tories were prior to that. It bluntly shows how all the parties consistently for a very long time have ignored the worst off in our society, the people who live in council flats, the people who do, you know, who have the lowest paid jobs. I mean, I can tell you that when my wife became the first Labour councillor for our ward in 2021, and she was deluged immediately with requests by people who were still living in their council flats, where nothing had been done for decades because the Tories literally ignored them. And she was deluged with people saying, you know, we need this done, we need this done. And that time, and we weren't in power, but she did everything she could to get repairs done. And she got loads of people's stuff repaired, you know. It's the fact of the matter is, it's a matter of will. I mean, my wife's an old school councillor who just believes in the local community. She could actually be a member of any party or none. She's just somebody. She's doing this because she loves her community, and she was doing it long before she was a councillor. Just doing it as Mrs. Bain, you know, Mrs. Southwick. People called her just because she was someone who's extrovert, caring, Christian, went around trying to help people. So she still does, only she's got a label of being a councillor now. And which means she has more power, more opportunity to actually use what small amount of resources is available to actually do that stuff. But you know, we're in a terrible situation, and I do want to finish now because my voice is nearly going, and I've got asthma, as I think you probably know already. And I want to finish with this poem because this poem is really important, Joe. It's a true story. It's a poem that I do at nearly every gig that I do. I've always done it. Many people have said it's the best poem I ever wrote. It's very personal, but in terms of what is happening in this country right now, it's incredibly important. It's a poem about reconciliation, and it's called Never Too Late. My father died when I was 10, and when she dried her tears, Mum met you in the choir. She'd known of you for years. I was so pleased when she told me that she would be your wife, and I looked forward happily to a new man in my life. But you were the classical singer who thought rock and roll was junk, and I was the Bolan boogie boy who soon became a punk. You were the civil servant for whom everything had its place, and I was the left-wing activist, out there and in your face. Yes, you were the head of the household, and I was the stroppy kid. We wound each other up for sure. We flipped each other's lid, but later we both learned so much, and something new began. And here's a poem I wrote for you, you decent, gentle man. So I went off to my own life, left you and Mum to yours. A few words about football, then the sound of closing doors. But the passing of so many years gave us both time to reflect, and slowly, oh so slowly, we forged a new respect. When you were ill the first time and found it hard to walk, I'd take you to the hospital and we would sit and talk. It felt so right and normal, and it was such a shame that it had taken all this time, both stubborn, both to blame. Because you were the head of the household and I was the stroppy kid. We wound each other up for sure. We flipped each other's lid, but later we both learned so much and something new began. And here's a poem I wrote for you, you decent, gentle man. When Mum came down with Alzheimer's, 5 years, you cooked and cared. And we were round there every day, so many thoughts were shared. Your simple, honest loyalty. The vows you made you'd keep. No longer the big boss man, me, no longer the black sheep. Then came that day in hospital. The end was near. We knew. You told me, I do love you, John. I said, I love you too. You took my hand and squeezed it. Our eyes were filled with tears. The first time that we'd said that, it took 37 years. Because you were the head of the household and I was the stroppy kid. We wound each other up for sure. We flipped each other's lid, but later we both learned so much and something new began. And here's a poem I wrote for you, you decent, gentle man. It's never too late, never too late, never too late to say you love someone. And if it wasn't too late for me and John, it's never too late for anyone. And I send that out with love to everybody on both and all sides of this fractured country, because we need to come together and we need to do so without outside interference and with love and understanding. And the first thing that's got to be done is restore some dignity to the lives of the poorest and most badly affected by the absolutely disgusting greed of the bankers and the billionaires. Simple as that.
Beautiful. Absolutely amazing. And if I could just finish myself with a quote from a Marvin Gaye song, "Only love can conquer hate." It's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, man.
I'll definitely have to come and
I wanna
watch one
say
of your
one more
gigs
thing.
soon. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so you're in London on the 23rd of November. I'm doing a show with my good friend John Hegley and Clive Langer's band. Clive Langer is one of the great music producers of our age. Produced everybody from Madness to Dexys Midnight Runners. I know it's not your generation, but what a great music producer anyway. Dublin Castle. 23rd of November. Come on to that one. That'll be good. I mean, there's
I'll
many
be
more.
there.
I'm gigging all over the place. Okay, man. And big love to your dad as well. I've had some fascinating conversations with him. He's a lovely, lovely guy.
Thank you very much for your time.